So I'm going to tell you a bit about the Dutch cannabis market. Always when people talk about cannabis, they know they have to talk about the Dutch market. Although I have to say, in a lot of conferences I go to, and as Benjamin knows, I go to a lot of conferences, the Dutch market tends to be overlooked, is what I noticed. So I'm just going to talk you through it, and it's going to be divided into 4 main sections. So that's basically the recreational cannabis system as it currently is. So the coffee shops, as I think is known to everybody here. The second part is the current medicinal system that we have for quite some time already. Then I'm going to talk a bit about the medical tender that's ongoing. So there's going to be 2 new growers in the current medical system in the Netherlands. And the final part is the closed coffee shop experiment, het gesloten coffee shop experiment, which is going to be where there's 10 growers selected to provide all the cannabis for the coffee shops in 10 municipalities in the Netherlands. I'm going to gloss over this very quickly. That's a photo of me. So I'm an account manager at Hortilux, which is a lighting company for horticulture in the Netherlands. And there I do medical cannabis and vertical farming. And I do the business development and strategy for the company because it's new markets. The other thing that I do is I work for the Institute for Medicinal Cannabis. I'm actually a founder, and what it is, it's an institution that we found last year. It's a non-profit organization, and it's a collaboration between universities, pharmacies, and the Dutch Ministry of Health. So we're doing all these nice things. I'll talk a bit more about the institute at the end of the presentation. But a lot of discussions we had today is, where's the collaboration among parties? Well, in the Netherlands, we're now having it. Still starting, but we have made a start on collaboration. It's something I'll talk a bit more on later. I don't have time, so I have no idea if I'm going on schedule or not. So I'm just going to talk and we'll see where we go. So this is, I think, what everybody knows. This is the most famous coffee shop in the Netherlands. This is the current recreational system where we have coffee shops dispensing cannabis since the 1970s. This is the Bulldog. This is one of the most famous ones, and as you can see, it was founded in 1975, and it's still the main attraction, the main coffee shop most of the tourists go to in Amsterdam. And funny thing, I've been there once because I had a guy over from Japan, and he was all very serious, and we were talking about CPD and the regulations there, and he really wanted to see a coffee shop, so I went with him to this coffee shop, and I showed him, look, you can actually buy legally. Sort of legally, but we'll touch on it later. You can buy a joint, and well, I've almost never seen such a happy face in my life. So these are a lot of numbers. I'm going to go through a couple of them. Basically, what I'm gonna show you is a couple of things that I think are main interests. That is the coffee shop that's available, the cannabis that's available in coffee shops. This is mapped the THC percentage. So every year we have a THC monitor in the Netherlands by a Dutch institution, the Trimbos Institute. And what they do is they monitor the THC concentration in cannabis. And what they found is a trend where you can see the THC is getting higher and higher and higher in Dutch coffee shops. And mainly because that's what they feel like the consumers need. What you can also see is that this is going to be a lot, by the way. All these graphs and things are all in Dutch. My apologies for that. It was very hard to find anything in English. I had to make the presentation over the weekend, so I didn't have time to translate all of the graphs, but I will explain it. So this is nader wheat, which is basically Dutch wheat grown in Holland and sold in Holland. This is imported wheat, is the yellow line. And the purple one is imported harsh. I'm not going to talk about harsh that much, but I think these are the main ones to focus on. And you see that the imported wheat is very low in concentration, and the THC in the Netherlands is going up more and more. What's also funny to know, there's a lot of talks here about pricing of cannabis, and we have a lot of patients in the Netherlands claiming that the cannabis in the pharmacies are more expensive than in the coffee shops, which is actually not true. But as you can see, the current price of the average price of Dutch cannabis in the coffee shops is €11.70. And even the strongest, supposedly strongest, because it's an uncontrolled product, is €14.21 per gram. So you can really see that there's an increase in pricing. It's hard to explain why the pricing of the cannabis is going up. I think mainly because of its, what they think it is that it's harder and harder to get from your illegal production site into the coffee shop, so the price is coming up, but you really see a clear trend going up. Some other numbers, the production of Dutch weed was estimated to be between 180 to 1,000 tons in the coffee shop. Again, it's very hard to see what the exact number is because the growing of cannabis in the Netherlands for coffee shops is illegal, so there's no understanding of how much cannabis is actually being grown for the coffee shops. And it's also a bit hard to see because we have a lot of tourists coming. So they say that even a third of the tourists that visit Amsterdam are also visiting a coffee shop. So it's very hard to see how much exactly is being consumed. Also very hard to say what the exact market size is, but just to see based on the tons, based on the selling price, they value the market around 1 billion or even above 1 billion euros. Just to put it into perspective, this is also a bit, I'm gonna go over a bit faster. A lot of people don't know, but the cannabis in coffee shops is not being legally produced. It's a system where, if I explain it very simply, the cannabis sort of magically appears in the inventory of the coffee shops because it's illegal to produce the cannabis. It's illegal for the coffee shop to buy the cannabis, so it just sort of magically appears in the inventory of the coffee shop, which is, I think everybody knows, not an ideal system. There's a lot of rules they have to do. They cannot sell to minors. The inventory is about only 500 grams. They cannot sell hard drugs. They cannot sell any the edibles and the drinkables they have in Canada. So there are very strict rules on what they can and cannot do, but currently it's basically cannabis flower and pre-rolled products, what they have. Well, this is what we call the problem with, in Dutch, well, in English it's the back door. It's basically how does the cannabis get in and how do you look at the system, how does the cannabis get in and what comes into the coffee shop, because the coffee shop owner doesn't know. And it's a lot of what you can see. The product of today is not the same product as it is tomorrow because they don't know what they're getting. It's not a controlled product at all. So there's a lot of problems with, one, crime. A lot of mayors of the municipalities are concerned with the crime surrounding because the production of cannabis is becoming more and more professional. You see that it's not a lot of homegrown, but it's these big organizations providing cannabis to the coffee shops, which you can imagine just is organized crime. And the other aspect is quality. There's been a lot of reports on contaminants in the cannabis in the coffee shop, a lot of pesticides. All these things are also being monitored. And you can imagine if a product is uncontrolled, untested, appears out of thin air, you will have some problems with quality. So again, apologies for all the Dutch. This is the current medicinal system. I'm gonna go to medicinal cannabis now. So this is basically what the chain currently is. We have a grower, which I think everybody knows is Bedrocan in the Netherlands. The Bedrocan, what they do is they provide all their cannabis to the Dutch government, to the Bureau Medicinal Tender, which is the Office of Medicinal Cannabis. And then every part is one party. It's all tendered. So we have one party who does the growing. We have one party who does the laboratory analysis. We have one party who does the packaging and distributing. We have one party who does the gamma irradiation. And it's all tendered processes. So they all have a license to do it for a couple of years. Most of them are EU tendered product. And even you could fill in that you say, okay, we want to apply for this standard process. As you know, Bedrocan has been doing it for quite some time. These are the current products that are available in the Dutch system. So these are 5 varieties, all with obviously a Bedrocan name, and they're all different THC and CBD content. One is an indica, and as you can see, there are just different varieties. There's one CBD variety, which I think has a relatively low CBD content, but it's what we have to work with in the Netherlands. Okay, again, a lot of data. The current the data in the Netherlands, we have about 9,000 patients officially through pharmacies. And when I say patients, what I mean is these are patients that get a prescription from their general practitioner or from a specialist. And then we say that we only have 9,000 official patients. Again, which I think is everywhere, How many actual patients do you have? That's very hard to say. In the Netherlands, it's very easy to get your cannabis from a coffee shop, and there's a lot of reports, a lot of anecdotal evidence that a lot of patients or users are getting their product from the coffee shop, which is obviously not what you want. You want your medicine to come from a pharmacy. So anywhere between 9 and 170,000 patients or users, because it's very hard to say what is medical and what's recreational cannabis. Where's the line? Like, when is something medicinal, when is something recreational? And for a lot of patients or users, this is not so clear, because let's say you have trouble sleeping, you're tired, and then you're using the cannabis. Is that recreational or is that medical? And when is your sleep that heavy, your sleep problems that heavy that it becomes medical, and where's that line? So it's a very unclear line as to when it happens. We now have floss and oil. We have cannabis floss, the tops, the dry tops, since 2003. We have the cannabis oil since 2015. This is the current price per gram of, I think it's €5.50. So I think it's a very reasonable price for patients. And what the OMC has done is they even lowered the price. It originally started out as €8. They're now making some profit due to the export of cannabis, as you might know, the export to all the countries mentioned there. Because it's a government organization, they're not allowed to make any profit. They use that money to lower the price for patients. So I think a very reasonable price. Only what you've seen is that the number of patients were growing. So this is not the number of patients. Actually, this is the amount of prescriptions given out in the pharmacy. But what you can also see is that it's going down in the last years. So not the same trend as you see in Germany, where it's keep growing and growing and growing. In the Netherlands, it actually went down. There are two main reasons for that. Reimbursement stopped in 2017. You can immediately see the decline. And the second is that we have a national organization for general practitioners, which also have a negative advice on the use of cannabis. So we have a very conservative situation where the GPs don't recommend cannabis, and we don't have the product reimbursed anymore, and that's immediately hurting the market and limiting access of patients. So we were growing rather fast, as you can see. It's now a decline. Quickly over the pros and cons. I think what is good is that medicinal cannabis is available for everyone who gets a prescription. It's available in the pharmacies. Almost all pharmacies you can get the flower from. And it's also always possible to get cannabis oil, but there are only a couple of pharmacies who are making the cannabis oil because it's medicinally prepared, meaning the pharmacies have to make their own product. There's not like like the talk we just had, an Aurora or Tilray available that have cannabis oil in stock. It's all being medicinally prepared by pharmacies themselves. I think we have a lot of experience in the Netherlands. We have a good idea about dosage. We have pharmacies involved since 2003. They have tens and tens and tens of thousands of patients. So I have a good idea on dose and administration forms, which I think is very valuable. What's the problem? We only have one grower. It's monopolized by the state. It's limiting very much what we can and cannot do. The current laws are very outdated. The CPD is not individually mentioned. So there's a lot of current problems I think you see everywhere where the laws are just not up to date with the current situation. But the main problem is that for the patients is that it's not reimbursed. Because it's not reimbursed, patients are turning to the coffee shop. I think this is mostly hurting our sector. And these are, by the way, all the oils that are available from the Bedrochem products. Quickly, we have a new tender. So there's now one grower. There's going to be a second grower of medicinal cannabis, and it's standardized that it's going to be two new ones. So it's divided into two plots. One of the plots being basically exactly what it is now. So the current 5 varieties that are available, there's like a new plot where I say, okay, you have to do exactly what is now currently available. So you can imagine that, and you have to do it in a standardized way. So you can imagine that Bedrochem has quite an advantage on doing exactly what they are doing now. So now, in theory, 5 and only 4 companies left have to prove that they can do exactly that in a standardized way, and they have to do it within 10% of the bandwidth. I don't know for everybody who's familiar with that, but that means that you have to be in spec. You have either 10% below or 10% above the specifications you hit. So if you have 10% THC, you can only have 9 or 11, and if it's below 9% or above 11%, you're out of spec, and the OMC won't offtake your product, you can basically destroy it. We do have a second plot, and there you can have more choices in variety. The only rules for the second plot are don't do what the first plot's doing. So what you're most likely going to see is that Berrocan will get their product renewed. So there we have Berrocan is going to remain in their exactly what they're doing, and hopefully next year we'll have one new medicinal grower in the Netherlands. I'm going to go over this quickly. This is the timeline. It's basically the same as it was with the German medicinal tender. It's been a mess. It's been tenderized multiple times. It's withdrawn, published again, withdrawn. One of the main problems in 2018 was with the prior experience. It was illegal to produce cannabis in the Netherlands, but you had to have prior experience with growing to grow. So you don't have to be a genius to work out that that was a bit of a problem, and also that heavily favored parties from other countries, which was also something that was really debated, like, is that what you want? And you can only have growers from other countries. It's still going very, very slow. We're now in the process that only 4 growers are left, and they have to prove that they can have multiple stable batches in the Netherlands. But things are going very slow. I see you have a nice typing error in the last sentence, but expected Q3 2023, and we started all the way in 2016. I think you have an understanding of the timelines, things are progressing, just to get one new grower. Now, I think this is clear. What are the pros? We're gonna have more than one producer. What are the cons? It's taking forever. It's taking forever to just select basically one new grower. And the other ones, and I get it makes sense, you want to have the same products available that are currently available, but yeah, you heavily favor the one who is currently producing it. What I have a note, there is a, again, this is diving very heavily into the Dutch market. There's just the new health minister just published that the role of the Dutch Office of Medicinal Cannabis is going to change. Now they're a very active player, so they are the ones who are technically the owner of the cannabis, and they're the ones exporting it, and they want to take that role out, so that they're just going to be a supervisor to the whole process, basically as another. And that would really open up the market, and I think that's something that could be very interesting for the entire EU market, where it's not an active player as a government, but more of a supervisory role, which will really open up the import of cannabis, growing of different varieties, the use of extracts. So this could really change the dynamic of the market. Okay, I think most people are here for this one. This is the design of the closed coffee shop experiments. What is it? You're gonna have basically 10 growers in 10 municipalities. So 10 municipalities are participating in this experiment. And what is it? All the coffee shops in those municipalities are working, they all work with the official growers in the experiment. So normally you have illegal growers, we don't know where it's coming from. Now you have 10 growers who are selected, and they're gonna provide all the cannabis for all the coffee shops in those 10 municipalities available. The main thing is they're gonna work with quality product. So there are quality recommendations for the cannabis they made. It has to be quality controlled. We have to use track and trace. It has to be analyzed. A couple of other rules. Basically, they want to have good product in the coffee shop. That's the main reason. Again, a very long timeline as well here in the recreational market. It's been going on. It's been going on forever. Also, at first, it was very poorly designed, and then we had a lot of applicants because it was unclear what exactly the conditions and restrictions were on participating. At some point, there were 149 applicants for just the 10 spots, and then they said, okay, they don't all comply, but we still had 51 applicants left. At the point, they all complied with the rules. They all were all eligible to do the growing for the tender. And they then did a lottery, which you can imagine is also maybe not the ideal. It is fair, but is it an ideal situation where you have luck decide who is going to grow for the experiment? Because remember, it's an experiment. It has to go well to see if it will actually change in the Netherlands, if we will have recreational cannabis at some point. So ideally, you want the best growers. And of course, it's hard to say who are the best growers. But is a lottery the best way or maybe we should have designed something that's a bit more strict and that heavily favors growers with experience, so the outcome will be the best. Also a lot of problems. Some of them who have been selected already fell out because they didn't comply. They had previous criminal records. Some of them are already being bought by Canadian producers, so they're also not, who were not eligible, but are now just able to buy the companies that are eligible. So is this a situation that you want? So they're not. Also, it started way back. It was gone through Parliament in 2019, and now they're hoping they have the first production batch next year. It means then you have the experiment, 4 years, then you have to analyze the experiment another year. Then Parliament has to decide on, okay, what are we now going to do? So I am not expecting recreational cannabis. Maybe I'm not giving away my takeaways, but within now and 8 years, there will be no recreational cannabis in the Netherlands outside of the experiment. So I hope I'm not disappointing anyone, but I think that's at least a realistic time frame. What are the growers going to do? They have to produce at least 6,500 kilograms up to 65,000 kilograms, because that's the estimate production for the entire experiment. Funny thing is, there's 10 growers, but the coffee shops decide where they offtake their cannabis from. So in theory, one grower can supply the entire experiment, or 10 growers can all equally distribute and all do at least 6,500 kilograms of cannabis. So we'll have to see. The coffee shops are basically your clients. So they will decide what they buy, what varieties are they going to buy, and what are they going to select on. So that will be very interesting to see. I've seen a lot of the business plans from the growers, and they all expect that they're the one grower that are going to supply the entire market. So that will be very interesting to see how that will play out. As you can see, I've listed a lot of cons on this one for the experiment. I think one of the main cons is that the big municipalities don't participate in the experiment. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Amsterdam, most of the cannabis being sold and bought is in Amsterdam. They have a lot of tourists, and they have most of the problems are in Amsterdam. But I can imagine, because there are so many coffee shops, it's very hard to involve them. But because they didn't involve the biggest municipalities, also how representative is this test for the rest of the Netherlands? The other problems are, again, very long selection process. The timelines are unclear. In my opinion, tender condition could have been way, way stricter. There's no procedure for the starting material. Also, again, in short, also your starting material, where does it come from? It's not legal. So how do you work with this? There's a sort of transition phase where they sort of turn a blind eye, and then you magically have your starting material in your production facility, and then you can start producing. Which I find also a big absence, but maybe I'm also a bit biased because I'm from Dutch horticulture, is that there's an absence of the well-known bigger tomato growers, cucumber growers, who are all not present. They all didn't have the luck in the lottery. Another thing I find very, very weird is that there's also hashish in there, so you have to do, you can make edible production. So now, but it has to be done by the grower. So besides growing, you also have to have a separate quality process for the making of a food product. So you can really see that it's not really being thought through, okay, for who is this for, and what are they going to do? Like, I don't know if there are growers in the room, but I don't know how many experience you have with baking products and having a whole quality system for baking products, because it's really a different market all again. The main thing for the coffee shops is, and with the experiment, they now have to offtake all of their products from the legal growers, but after the 4 years the experiment is done, what's going to happen then? What if the experiment fails? Then they have to turn back to the illegal markets. They're very afraid of, okay, are my current illegal suppliers going to turn my back on me? So they're very worried about what will happen at the end. A lot of delays. I won't go through it. Final slide. I have no idea if I'm in time, but I think I've talked enough. So this is the final slide. It's just a couple of mentions I want to do. So in the Netherlands, we now have the Institute for Medicinal Cannabis, which is an open non-profit organization. It's all kinds of organizations. We have, like I said, hospitals, pharmacies, but all scientists. And we're doing all kinds of things which I think help the market. So very recently, what we did is, just one example, is that we launched a digital video, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you always have these papers next to your subscription, you know, with all the list of side effects and a super long paper that comes with your medicines. We have made a video of that for medicinal cannabis, also for people who have trouble reading those. So it's basically for patients. We created video ones for floss, for medical cannabis in general, for medical cannabis oil. We created these videos who everybody can use if they want. So just a very short, understandable language, 3-minute videos for all the patients in the Netherlands. So I think these are the ways to go forward as an industry where you work together from a non-profit perspective. What I also think the Netherlands is doing very well, and which might be interesting also for companies outside the Netherlands, is that there are research grants, quite significant research grants. One is already being done of almost $2 million, where they're going to look into neuropathic pain. It's a very complicated studies, but they're funding clinical studies in the Netherlands from the government. And now we're going to do one for therapy-resistant epileptic young children, basically Epidiolex. And there probably will be another round, and it most likely will be about MS and spasms. So there is clinical trials being funded in the Netherlands. Other things that I think are okay is that the role of the Dutch Office for Medicinal Cannabis is changing. They want to make the rules for having an opiate license in the Netherlands more clear. And all these things work together that we have a more open climate in the Netherlands, where I think we could do a lot more work. I mean, we can have a sort of biotech hub, basically the role that now Denmark is claiming, that they have the knowledge hub with biotech companies and analytical labs and everything. But I think the Netherlands can also play a vital role in that with the experience they have. And the other part could be is that personally, I think we a bit lost our lead, is what they always say. The Dutch lost the lead in cannabis. But I strongly believe that if the rules will be changed and Dutch horticulture will get into the producing of medical cannabis, that we can get right back on top, because I think the professionalism in the Dutch horticulture industry can really change the perspective. So in short, it's difficult in the Netherlands, it's very difficult, it's unclear, timelines are very long, but things are slowly changing, and I think it's a market that should be taken into account by everyone, and I hope from now on every conference has a small part dedicated to the Dutch market. That was my presentation.